Good morning, everyone. My name is Meghan LeVota, and I'm an ENFJ, and today I want to talk really quickly about how extroverted thinking users and extroverted feeling users can just get each other wrong, and especially over text. So if you are listening to this and you are a J, then this is probably going to be even more true to you because J's prefer either extroverted feeling or extroverted thinking. So, but if you're a P and you use, and you have either extroverted thinking or extroverted feeling in your stack, this is also going to apply to you, but maybe not as strongly. So, what fascinates me about the context of communicating over text or over the internet or just over written word in general is that you don't really have any other cues about how they're emoting, how they might be feeling, what their face looks like, things like that. And I know a girl who is a TJ. I'm not sure if she's an S or an N, but she's an extrovert, so she's an ETJ, leads with extroverted thinking, who was kind of freaking out about a love interest and not knowing, essentially, if she should say something to this person because she felt like she already initiated and that it was that other person's turn to initiate and didn't want to stoop to that level to initiate again, and was kind of freaking out, kind of hyperventilating about this. And it's interesting because me, as an extroverted feeler, I do not react that emotionally to, well, I can, but I don't normally react that emotionally to those sort of decisions specifically. And it was interesting. What was so interesting to me is that this ETJ girl was freaking out and didn't know what to do or didn't know if they should say something. And then whenever they did decide to say something, it sounded so cold and blunt and abrasive, like just so short that the person reading on the other end would have had absolutely no idea how that person was feeling. And before anyone comments and is like, are you sure they were a TJ? Because that sounds like an FJ thing to do. I know that this person's a TJ. They just weren't freaking out about it publicly. They just were telling only a few people about that. So an FJ might be more likely to, if they're in a group of friends, be like, guys, what should I do? But a TJ is going to probably be a little bit more prideful about that stuff. But I guess I'm just saying that it does happen. TJs do worry about romance, about, where their life's going, their career. They do worry about stuff. But what's so interesting to me is that since extroverted thinking is rooted by introverted feeling, that they seem to be so afraid to say something, or they're like afraid of putting their heart out there and then what the consequences might be, because they don't sometimes think that their introverted feeling can handle it. They don't want to say, hey, would you like to go on a date sometime, unless they are emotionally prepared to handle what the rejection might feel like. Now, this might differ for girls and guys because I know that male TJs tend to be a lot more cool with like being the first one to like make a move and that sort of context. But I guess what I'm saying is that a TJ could be really emotional, but then what you see from them is a blank face. And over text, you see a few letters or someone writing things with a period at the end, and it's like no smileys, just very straight like to the point text. And you have no idea when you look at it, you have no idea the effort or the emotional intent behind what it took for them to initiate and send that text. What I think is so interesting is that extroverted feelers are always thinking about, when they make an action, what are the possible emotional consequences that could come of this. And when an ENFJ is, not just ENFJ, but when an FE user is using a bunch of smileys and being like, hey, with 5 Ys, and like, how's it going? Sometimes it seems to me that the TE user will look at that text message and assume all of this emotion behind that, when really, for an FE user to send something that is quote unquote risky, to put themselves out there, they're prepared for the emotional outcome. They are prepared for rejection. Yeah, I guess really just the context of love and romance makes the most sense here. So I'm just going to keep going with that. For example, as an FE user, if I was to be using way too many emojis and be like, well, how are you doing? What's up? Oh my God, hi. That honestly, it seems like TE users look at that and think, wow, they must really, really, really care if they're going all like that about it. But for me, that actually might indicate that I don't care as much as if I was more guarded, because FE is rooted by introverted thinking, and so it had to be logical introverted thinking to there's like a logical root to that extroverted emotional expression. So there had to be a rationalization behind why an FE user would put themselves out there like that. So I guess the point I'm really saying, which is a little biased from an FE perspective, because, you know, that's me, is that FE users seem to be looked at by TE users as too much, or like, oh, they're so clingy, or oh, they must be so into me, when really, for them to put themselves out there means that they have a calm interior, because their introverted thinking said, yes, it's okay, you could send that, that makes sense. I'm prepared to handle either outcome. I'm prepared for this text to be ignored. I'm prepared to be rejected, or I'm not. And this isn't making as much sense as I would have liked. Hopefully it does make sense to some of you, but what I think is ridiculous to me is how TJs can get so bent out of shape emotionally about something, and you would have no idea because of the way that they would text. It would be so minimal, like hello, period. Where like an FE user with the same amount of emotional intensity would be like, oh my God, hey, like, how's it going? But the FE user would be less fearful about what was going to happen than the TE user, because extroverted feeling is able to sort of predict how people are going to react emotionally, and their introverted thinking is going to think about, be pretty opinionated and use like a logical system about what are the odds that this person is trustworthy or not. They're going to analyze people and be like, it's likely that this person is going to respond well to this or not well to this. But for a TJ to put themselves out there and either ask someone out or even just show any sort of effort toward a person, they're going to be doing it, they're going to be putting their heart on the line. They aren't going to know what you're going to say next. They're just doing it because they want to. And they aren't as secure about what the FE sort of outcome could be on the other side. So they might be more emotional deep down, but they look like they have no emotions. Whereas an extroverted feeler might be confident in their decision to put themselves out there, but look like they have a lot of emotions about it based on how much the actual amount of effort that was put out there. So let's talk about effort for a second. Extroverted thinking, whether you use it or not, let's just talk about it as a concept right now. Whenever extroverted thinking sort of perceives the level of effort, the level of investment that you are giving. Whereas extroverted feeling will sort of perceive the mood behind what you're saying, or the emotion behind what you're saying, or potentially like what your intent might be behind what you're saying. But extroverted thinking seems to really look at it versus like a level of investment. Something that I've learned from having TE users around me is that in terms of romance, things like that, it's like I give a little and then you meet me halfway. And then I give a little and then you meet me halfway. In this really sort of fair, strategic way where they sort of make sure that their love is not going to be taken for granted, and they want people to earn their love with their investment. Like, I invest a little bit, and then you're going to invest a little bit, and then their trust grows completely over time. Whereas for an ENFJ specifically, and for an FE user, they are going to not think as much about the investments, but think more about the intent that that person has, the intent that you have, and the emotional expression they're giving off, and the emotional expression that you're giving off. So an FE user in the same situation wanting to get to know someone would say, hey, I'd like to get to know you. Would you also like to? Which to a TE user, that might seem like an extreme investment or an extreme effort for someone that did not show that back to you. Where for an extroverted feeler, it's like, oh, well, I wasn't even thinking about the effort. To me, that was absolutely no effort to just ask a question to decide whether or not I should put myself out there further. Because different things required effort for different people, but I guess the emotional intent behind the effort for an extroverted thinker is very pure in a weird way. So for them to text you, for a TE user to text you and say, hey, how was your day? That took a lot of effort and a lot of intent. They weren't just like, oh, texting over on their phone, like, hey, blah, 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 how's it going? Like, they are checking up on you. Like, I don't know, like, they might have had a lot of emotions behind whether or not they should say something. But then when they finally decided to do it, it might look like nothing to an extroverted feeler. Like, oh, they just want to know how I'm doing. Oh, okay. I want to know how everyone's doing all the time. Big whoop. Like, there's kind of this disconnect. And I'm talking about TJs and FJs because it's easier to read, but Ps do this too. So, like, if you're an FP dating an FJ, you might feel like this. You might relate to the TJ more because you also use extroverted thinking, but you might also sort of see where the FJ is coming from. But, yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about text messages and how if you look at them at face value and you say someone that says hello, period, and someone says, hey, how's it going, smile. If you look at them, it might be obvious just on face value, like, oh, the person with the emoji cares more because they, typed more and put more out there. But that's not really true. And TJs just sort of have this aura about them where they aren't going to give to you unless they feel you deserve it, or unless you've earned it, or unless you guys have established that sort of trusting relationship. But whenever they do something, whenever they do exert themselves, that's very intentional, and that's very had a lot of thought behind it and a lot of emotion behind it. But what you TJs have to know about extroverted feeling is that there is not that same intention behind extroverted feeling. And so I think that a lot of extroverted thinking users have been scared off by me by just asking them how they're doing, and because they assumed that I was that calculated with my effort and with my investment level, when I'm not. Because to me, which I want to make another video about this topic, but to me, I just view my energy as limitless. I know that you guys might be saying, well, no, we all have limited energy. But for me, no, the more that I give love to people, the more love that I have to give. I just really feel like I'm just a fountain of emotional, like, love that I can give. The more I ask people how they are, the better I feel, the better my day is, the more energized I am, and, the more momentum I have to ask other people how their day is. I don't view that as a limited resource. So whenever I'm adding an emoji, that doesn't mean that I care more than if I am not. And in fact, almost paradoxically, if an extroverted feeler is like, hey, how are you? Like, do you want to do this or this or this with me? That might even indicate that they don't care. If they have they either really, really care and they love you and you've gotten to that point in your relationship, but if you don't really know them that well and they're just like being kind of pushy or like asking you to do something or asking you, how was your day at work? Or how was this? That doesn't necessarily mean, like, they might actually indicate that they aren't as emotionally invested and that they're just trying to test the emotional waters to sort of see if you guys are compatible, or just to sort of get some emotional input from you, for them to put themselves out there and say something risky sort of indicates that they are emotionally prepared to deal with any outcome. Like, I texted this dude that I was not that interested in, and asked him if he would like to go out sometime a month ago. And I was very like, hey, I'd love to get to know you, like, can we go out sometime? And like, didn't get a response, but that did not really bug me because, well, like, it bugged me because that would hurt anyone's ego. I'm not trying to say that I am immune to those sort of things, but what I am trying to say is that I was prepared for that outcome, or else I wouldn't have even said that. Like, if I cared so much that, like, I couldn't even imagine how it would feel to be rejected like that, then maybe I would have asked that in person or done something differently. But whenever you see an FE user putting themselves out there like that, extroverted feeling is automatically looking at what could happen next. And extroverted feeling is already thinking about how they can take an action that would ensure their emotional well-being later on and in the future. I know ESFJs and ENFJs are very much like this with dating, is that they will just sort of say, hey, I'd love to go do this with you sometime, or I don't know, just sort of put themselves out there. And I guess I'm making this video because that's not like weak for people to do that. Like, that's actually quite bold and risky for people to do that, and those people aren't being emotional whenever they're doing that. They're just putting their emotional intent on the line, and then they're willing to see what happens and then handle it emotionally, whatever happens, and are kind of trying to prepare in advance about what could happen. Whereas it seems like TJs can be a lot more sensitive, or anyone that uses extroverted thinking can be a lot more sensitive, that would make them hesitant to put their emotional intent so outwardly expressed on the line because their introverted feeling might not know what to do with it if that were to come. And yeah, and I know an ISTP who also has done something similar of just, hey, like, would you like to hang out, yes or no? And sometimes extroverted feelers sort of put their emotional intent on the line like this, not because they're super into you or super attached to what you'll say, but because their introverted thinking is so ready to be done thinking about it that they just want you to answer yes or no so that they can move on and go on to other things. So, but if a TE and FI user was to say the same thing, like, would you like to go out with me, yes or no? Then they would be really, really wanting you to say yes. Like, they would not go to that extent unless they like really wanted to date you. But an FE and TI user would be doing that when they've reached the point where their introverted thinking was done thinking about it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they were so emotionally attached to the outcome. So anyway, that's how FE and TE can get each other wrong, especially over text message, whenever it's hard to sort of see the intent behind it. People misread extroverted feelings, emotional expression, and people assume that because extroverted thinking doesn't have an emotional expression that they don't care or something, which isn't true. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe if you like videos like this. I also will link my Facebook page below, which is called Personality Typology for Self-Growth, I believe, where we are having conversations over there every day about how to use Carl Jung's cognitive functions to empower yourself, to understand other perspectives, and just for the purposes of self-actualization and self-growth, rather than the stereotyping and the boxing in that a lot of other conversations might be happening surrounding personality type. Anyway, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.